Let me say this as well. Satan and demons and angels do not share God's divine attributes. Not his unshared attributes. Some of you think Satan is out to get you. He's not. He can't be everywhere like God. So there's a story in Daniel 9, just briefly. So the angel Gabriel's trying to get somewhere, and he's a few weeks late. It's kind of a weird story. Gabriel shows up, they're like, you're late. He's like, I know. I've been fighting demons for weeks. They slowed me down. You know what that means? Angels, like us, they need to travel. They do. They fly first class, but they have to travel like us. And it means just like us, sometimes if somebody fights us, it takes us a while to get through the fight. That's not true for God. God doesn't need to travel. God's not like, sorry, I'm late. I mean, I got in quite a scrum. I was trying to fly over, a major city, and it's such a stronghold. It took me weeks. No, it's not like that for God. Bad teaching happens when we take some of God's attributes, but not all. Let me speak to those of you that maybe have a little church experience. Usually it's not that something false is said about God, it's that not all that is true is said about God. So if you grew up in more of a progressive, liberal, mainline Protestant church, here were God's attributes: love and mercy, that's it. You don't need to repent, you're great. You pick your gender, you do what you like, everybody's going to heaven, a loving God would never send anybody to hell, you'll be fine. That's what you're told. It's not true. What about God's holiness? What about his justice? What about his wrath? What about his judgment? No. The guy in the rainbow dress who's supposed to be the pastor said that those were his junior high years, and he's moved on. He's matured now. How many of you grew up in Pentecostal church? Raise your hand. I know you want to. I know you do. Okay, so I know you do. Okay. If you grew up in a Pentecostal church, they focused on God's immanence, which is his presence and his power. So every sermon is about God's here and he's going to do miracles. And it's all about chasing and seeking signs and wonders, which can leave you open to the demonic, because Satan does counterfeit signs, wonders, and miracles. And sometimes God decides he's not going to do a miracle today. He's like, today I'm going to work out a sovereignty. I'm going to organize events and let it play itself out. You're like, God, did you abandon me? He's like, no. It's not always a miracle. I've got other attributes and I'm free, and sometimes I show up and do stuff and other times I don't. And what happens then is, if you grew up in a Pentecostal tradition, then the question is, how do we make God do the stuff? If you can make him, he's not God. You are. God is not your employee, he's your Lord. He doesn't do what you tell him to do. He does what he wants to do. That's because he's sovereign. A couple other things. Some of you grew up in what is more of a Reformed or Presbyterian church. Well, they would stress that God is sovereign and God is holy. He's far away. He's not very relational. So these people, they're not very relational. They're sort of just mean and cruel and distant. They're probably right now on the internet proving my point by commenting. They're not going to stop and pray for me because they don't think that God answers prayer because he's sovereign. And how many of you grew up in a Baptist church? Some of you are like, I don't know. I mean, come out of the closet. Just own it. All right. If you grew up in a Baptist or more of a fundamentalist church, the attributes of God that were stressed is God is truthful and judge. So the Bible's true and he judges us. You know what those people are? Cheerless. They don't talk much about God's mercy, God's love, God's forgiveness, God's beauty. And so when you're in relationship with those people, every day feels like you're in court and they're sitting on the bench. Verse, guilty, guilty, guilty. Many Christians suffer from an insufficient view of who God fully and totally and truly is. We don't worship God with some of his attributes. We worship God for all of his attributes. A couple of things as well, and then I will get to my point. God can be known truly, but he can't be known fully. One of the reasons I've waited more than 30 years to teach this series is, okay, let's talk about God, okay? With a 3-pound brain, all right. Using language, okay. And you're a fallen sinner that grew up in the 80s listening to heavy metal, which means it's probably fried all the circuits anyways. So there has to be some humility when you go to study God. Right? God is bigger than language. Now, he's not contrary, but because God is a person, language strains to articulate the greatness and the glory and the grandeur of this God. And the goal of learning about God is not just to master God in the mind, but to marvel at God in the soul. Satan and demons, they know exactly who God is. They don't love him. You can study and knowledge puffs up. But until you get to a point where you're like, wow, you know everything. Wow, you created everything. Wow, you made human life. Wow! You wrote a book? Wow! You came for me? Wow, 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 wow! You want to be with me? No one does! Wow! That's incredible! You're loving? Oh, yes, I will be loved. You forgive? I've done some stuff. Wow! Right? You can get so familiar with God that you're no longer amazed by God.